Okay, I think we'll get this show on the road. Welcome, everyone. It is great to see you here today. Welcome to the March New Director Network. We're really excited to have you with us today. We are going to talk today about advocacy. The first couple of sessions that we did, we looked at roles and responsibilities and the value in building a collaborative team. And then last month, we had our Director of Policy and Legal, Abigail Westbrook, join us to talk with us about legal considerations for school board members. Hopefully she didn't scare you too much, but just elevated some of your knowledge a bit. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by my colleague, Marissa Rathbone, who is the Director of Strategic Advocacy. She is going to be talking about what does advocacy mean for new school directors? And her subtitle here is How to Elevate Your District's Greatest Needs Through the Year-Round Advocacy Cycle. So she will be heading into that. Just a reminder that I'm Tricia Lubach. I'm the Director of Leadership Development. I head up the Leadership Development team here at WSSDA. I'm also joined by my wonderful colleague, Christine Naharo, who assists many of you who contact our branch. We really provide most of the resources, guidance, training, and support to all of you school directors out around the state. And it's really our pleasure to serve you. So we talked a little bit last month. It seems like it was just last week, but it was last month, about the different branches at WSSDA. So for those of you who have not been here before, there are three main branches in WSSDA, and I've mentioned all three of them so far. So again, I come from the Leadership Development branch, where we provide support and training. Abigail Westbrook heads up the Policy and Legal, which provides model policies, legal resources, and information for you related to your roles as a school board member. And then today, Marissa's joining us to talk about strategic advocacy, what that means, what it looks like, and how you can get started in it. And so there's her topics. We'll let her go through those in just a minute here. The year-round advocacy calendar, what kind of resources are available to you, and then how you look ahead since the 2024 legislative session just wrapped up. And Marissa's just catching her breath after that. She'll talk with you about how to get ready for 2025 as well. So a couple things for you here just to have a really good webinar. I would suggest that you would mute yourself. You've all done that already. So great job. You already get 1 point there. Also, you can have your cameras on or off, whatever works for you. If you want them on, that's great. Even if you're eating your lunch, we're probably all eating our lunch right now. But if you want to keep them off while you're doing other things, that's just fine. We are going to take questions at the end. We have some time allocated to answer any questions you might have. You don't need to wait till the end to ask them, however. If you come up with a question as Marissa is going through some of her material, feel free to just type that into the Q&A box, not the chat box preferably, but the Q&A box down at the bottom. Type that in. I'll keep an eye on those questions as Marissa is sharing information with you, and then I'll share those questions with her at the end. Your questions are welcome. There are no dumb questions. There's a lot of great information here, and you may have some questions about how those work. Also, just an acknowledgement right now that this is being recorded, so just keep that in mind. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Marissa.
Great. Thank you so much, Tricia. Wonderful to be able to join you all for this new director network. It's a fresh perspective on offering support to you new directors. And I see some faces, or I'm sorry, not faces. Actually, I do see some faces, but also some names that I have not yet had the opportunity to work directly with. So that's exciting. Always excited to bring new school board members into the conversation around advocacy. And I'm just going to start by saying there's no perfect way to do this work, and there is always something to learn. So hopefully today you hear some new information that is useful to you, And also some of it may be repetitive to you as well. So hopefully we reach a sweet spot where it just moves the needle a little bit on your understanding about what good advocacy looks like. So welcome to the conversation, welcome to the work. Happy to have you here. I have the honor of being able to work closely with Tricia and Abigail as one of the 3 branch directors. Strategic advocacy is integral to the services and supports we provide to all school directors across the state. Most specifically, my goal and my branch's goal is to help equip you and the other 1477 with knowledge, tools, and resources so that you can effectively engage in advocacy. And advocacy does occur year round. You're going to hear me say that maybe nauseatingly. So, but it's absolutely true. It's not just during ledge session. It's actually a year-round effort. We'll talk more about when the most opportune times are for you to advocate. In addition, help you understand how we support, initiate, and/or oppose legislation in accordance with our WSSDA member adopted position platform. I do this work with the support of many school directors across the state, and also with our advocacy consultant, Mike Hoover, who has been working with us now for 2 legislative sessions as a WSSDA consultant, but has 30+ years as a parliamentarian, House and Senate counsel, and is a seasoned lobbyist up at the Capitol and helps us do a lot of the behind the scenes work. So you'll have an opportunity to engage with him at some point. He's not here today, but he certainly is part of this effort. So let me tell you a little bit about the legislative advocacy cycle. I really think about our advocacy cycle in 2 distinct phases. One is during session and one is between sessions. And that time between sessions is what we call interim. And so we are in interim right now. It's the time in between legislative sessions. One has ended and there's another one in the future. Legislators right now are deciding what their policy priorities are going to be for 2025. So right now is the best time for advocacy to occur. If you wait until 2025 to start advocating for the things that matter most to you, that'll be good work for the 2026 legislative session, but not for 2025. So the most important advocacy for next session starts happening right now. It's a time for you and your fellow school directors to reflect upon what happened this past session and plan for next steps. What do you all need the most in order to serve and support your students, staff, and community? And it's a great opportunity to build relationships, especially to engage your students, community, and your legislators in a collective effort around advocacy. There's not a lot of time during session to build relationships and engage stakeholdering. So now is the time to be doing that work in preparation for a ledge session, which is always very robust, whether it's short or long. So let's talk about the other sort of stage of the year-round advocacy cycle, which is the legislative session. We have a legislative session every single year, which isn't necessarily how every state conducts its legislative process, but we do every year. It always starts the second Monday of the year. This past year, and an even numbered year, was only 60 days long. Felt a lot longer, I can assure you, but it was 60 days, which they consider a short session. And then in odd numbered years, they refer to that as a long session, and that lasts for 105 days. These are the standard timeframes for a legislative session in odd and even numbered years. This doesn't take into account any potential special sessions, but we try to plan not to have those. Legislators plan not to have those too, and sometimes they pop up, but they are less frequent than they are talked about, because when they do happen, they are notable. Communication to legislators during a legislative session have to be very concise and targeted. Usually communication with a legislator during session is about a specific bill, a specific policy issue. And when communicating, it's done by phone, by text, maybe by email, but it's very targeted about what you're offering, what you're asking, and what you're learning. So not a great time to build relationships. It's not without possibility, but again, the real time to build relationships is right now. So it's a little differentiation between what's good about interim and what's good about session. This is one additional way to be thinking about your work as a school director at the local, state, and federal levels in terms of a year-round cycle. So when you think about advocacy, there's really no end, which is great and bad. It means that it's a continuum process, right? So you're starting a process now in the interim, and you'll be continuing that through legislative session, and you'll find that you learn things, and there are things that we didn't achieve, and we need to regroup and determine how we're going to elevate those priorities for next session. So if you look at this annual cycle, a couple things I just want to point your attention to, you'll notice in the center, there's a little bit of a pie. Happy belated Pie Day. And you'll notice a very small piece of the pie says session. Again, that's just to remind you that while session happens to be one of the most talked about and exciting parts of the advocacy cycle, it certainly isn't the longest period of time or necessarily the most significant. Right now, we find ourselves in this late March, May timeframe when school board, school director, and WSSDA committees are looking at proposals to our existing WSSDA platform. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, because some of this is WSSDA language that might not be familiar to you, and that's absolutely okay. You're going to hear it a lot as a school director, and eventually you'll get it if you don't have it now. So we're going to keep talking about it. So right now, school boards, your school boards, fellow school directors should be talking about the existing WSSDA position platform and potentially any suggested changes that you would have to it. And then through the month of May, we have a legislative and resolutions committee who will be reviewing position proposals from school boards across the state. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Then following that time frame, you will note that the work continues through the end of the year, and I'm going to dig into some of the more specifics by month in the next slides. So if we think about the year-round advocacy cycle starting in January, it's just sequentially, it might be easier for you to think about starting in January, moving through the end of the year. So you're going to kind of rewind a little bit. January through March or January through April is the legislative session time period. And again, like I said, that differs depending on whether it's an odd or even numbered year. This year's session ended in March. Next year's session will end in April. So during that time frame, you hopefully are staying engaged with WSSDA. We have multiple in-session tools, and I'll dig into those in a little bit, but lots of ways that we as staff working with our legislative committee are communicating with you what's going on during session. I'm going to point you to some of those resources later on, but just know we're working hard to make sure we're giving you ongoing updates about what's happening with the legislative process and any bills that may be of interest to you. During that time, we hope that you are engaged directly with your own legislators and their staff, who we often refer to as legislative assistants. And part of what you're doing there is just saying, hey, this bill really helps our district. This bill is really consequential to our district, and giving them data and stories to help inform your perspective. That's very helpful to them. You also may, during the legislative session, receive questions from your representative on the legislative committee. During a legislative session, I meet with the 24 legislative committee members who have been elected by you to represent you by director area on this committee. And this committee is responsible for helping me sort of navigate where there might be bills that come forward that represent some of your member adopted positions in a positive way, and maybe at the same time also represent some of your member adopted positions in an oppositional way. And then we try to navigate how we combine those multiple perspectives given your member adopted positions with the legislators when we weigh in on particular bills. So sometimes during that process, Ledge committee members will send an email out to the Ledge reps or the board presidents in their director area and say, hey, there's this bill about this particular issue. We have some questions around it. Could you quickly answer them? And we really encourage you to quickly respond to those questions as you are able, because it helps inform the Ledge Committee's weighing in on how we support or oppose a bill. You also should be asking your ledge rep. If you're not the ledge rep yet, you may be someday. And the ledge rep really serves as a conduit between WSSDA, who is communicating what's going on during session, and your own board at each board meeting. This isn't a requirement of boards to have a ledge rep, nor that they report at every public meeting, but it's a good practice and we highly recommend it. Even if it's just for a standing 10-minute update, maybe even just a 5-minute update, so that your ledge rep has a space at your board meetings to say, here's some of the pertinent things going on that we're learning about during session. Hope that you're staying in tune with what's going on. So again, the ledge rep is the bridge between our communication measures and your communication measures at the local level. I encourage you to ask next time you have a board meeting, or even reach out to your board president. So who is our ledge rep, and how might we communicate with them directly? And then of course, we would be asking our school board members to be reviewing the WSSDA position platform on a regular basis, including during the legislative session. I'm going to point you to that in a little bit in case you're wondering about it. So once the legislative session is over, either in March or April, and through the month of June, we'll call this post-session, we highly encourage you to thank your legislators for whatever progress they made. It's tempting after a legislative session to focus on the problems still, not to say that there aren't any, but we'll have plenty of time to dig into those here in the interim. This is an opportunity for you to point out what progress was made, because there always will be some progress, and it most likely will never be everything that we wanted it to be. But there is certainly something to be thankful for during the past legislative session. And any bill or any budget item that actually made it through a legislative session required your legislators to be involved in the discussion. They may not have voted for it, but because as a body they passed a bill or a budget item, thanking them and giving them reasons why it was important for that bill or that budget to pass will go a long way to encouraging them to communicate with you in the future about what else you might need. You probably have had the experience already, or will have the experience as a new director and a locally elected official, that a lot of people are coming at you complaining about the things that aren't happening. That never feels good. It's part of the job, but it doesn't feel very good, especially if they've never taken the time to thank you for the work that you have done and the work that you endeavor to do. Same is true for our state elected officials. So just keep that in mind as you're engaged with them. Also, I would encourage you to be inviting them to visit your schools during this period of time. Spring is a great time to get your legislators out into your buildings. It's a great time for them to see how their previous investments in the public education system have benefited students and staff. Be sure you show them that first when they get into the buildings. And then it's a nice segue for you to say, because of your investments, we've been able to do these things. See, look at our CTE program, our math program, our robotics program. However, our special education programs are still lacking support. Here are some things that you need to see and how your future investments could help solve for some of these problems. So always a sandwich. Start with the good, maybe show a need or a problem, and then close with the good as well. Identify your board priorities during this period of time. So it's not too soon for you to be taking inventory about what just happened and what gaps still need to be filled. This is the time now to be having this conversation in preparation, not just for your own district level advocacy during the interim, but also because it'll help you better engage in the WSSDA position platform process, which again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about here in detail. You'll notice we're talking a lot about that right now. This is the time frame in which school boards are submitting proposals about the position platform that will help inform our advocacy work year round. And you and your board have the opportunity to participate in that process right now. Also, I have a network too that I help support and lead called the Legislative Representative Network. We have several networks, New Director Network, where you're at currently. There's also a LegRep network. You might be lucky and belong to both. And if so, hopefully have an opportunity to participate in our monthly meetings, which will be held now the first Tuesdays at noon. July through August is a little bit of a slower time, perhaps for you and for legislators. However, strongly encourage you to continue communicating and meeting with them as they are able. This is an election year, which means that your legislators are going to be highly active if they are running for election again this fall, which means it's a great time to get meetings with them. They're going to want your vote. To whatever degree they can get it. And so inviting them to a coffee date or a conversation could be even more well received than usual. And it's a great opportunity for you to be building those relationships. Also during this time frame, there will be something called the General Assembly Handbook that will be released. The General Assembly Handbook is comprised of all of the position proposals that came through the position window, which is open right now, and will be available for your board to vote on at General Assembly in September. So we highly encourage every board together to take time to review that General Assembly handbook and the contents and determine whether or not your board is supportive or in opposition to the proposals that are laid forward in that document. Also, as a part of that work, your board will need to identify a voting delegate. One or more of you on your board will represent your board at General Assembly in voting for or against those proposals that are laid out in the General Assembly handbook. And please continue attending the Legislative Representative Network meetings. Fall, once you're back in full swing of the new school year, hope that you participate in and vote in General Assembly. The only individuals who can vote at General Assembly are school board members who have been designated as their voting delegate for their board. So if you're curious about what that is, hopefully someone on your board has a little bit of historical knowledge about who generally your voting delegate is and who it might be coming up. It could be you never know. Then following General Assembly, there's something we call a prioritization process. That process allows your board to weigh in on the most important positions in our position platform. And then that process helps to inform our priorities for the next legislative session. We hope you share that information along with data and stories with your legislators and that you continue to attend Legislative Representative Network meetings. And then to close out the year, of course, we hope that you'll attend all of the advocacy learning sessions at WSSDA's annual conference. If you haven't attended our annual conference yet, hope you get a chance to this year. It is a beautiful event. It is a celebration of achievement, as well as an opportunity to grow and learn your own skills with other school directors from across the state. And there will be multiple learning sessions on multiple different issues, including quite a few on advocacy. So you're welcome to join us there. You may have some new legislators at this point in time. I don't know if you knew this, but it is an election year, and therefore you may have some new representatives or potentially a new senator in your district. Be sure to introduce them and introduce yourself to them during this time frame. And if you're able to get an audience with them, schedule a time to connect with them before the session begins. That could be a phone call or a Zoom if you can't make it to them in district, or if they're just so busy because they're in a new spot, and continue to share data and stories with them and your returning legislators as well. Then you're going to do that all over again. I know there's a lot of information. It's so funny. I've been doing this work now for 5 years and I kind of feel like I got the hang of it now, but it took me a while. And now that I go through all these steps, I'm like, Wow, there's a lot of information in here. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, my apologies. Try to make sure that we are communicating as much as you might need to know, but in as simple as a way as possible. And as you know, with any new system that you're engaging in, there are lots of complexities that you'll gradually understand over time. So there's a lot in here you don't have to know with perfection right now. That's what your fellow school board members are for, and your WSSDA staff. I would just say at any point during the 365, actually there's 366 days this year, that you feel absolutely free to reach out to me to ask questions. I'll be sharing my contact information here shortly. You are welcome to text me, call me, send me an email, whatever communication strategy works best for you. If you're like, hey, I remember you mentioning something about a prioritization process during that new director meeting, but I can't remember what that was about. Can you tell me more about it? Again, there's no silly question at all. It's quite a big learning curve, and so I would invite you to just lean in and ask questions as we go. But I will tell you that we repeat this cycle year after year, and there's always something new, right? There's some repetition in the process, but there are new conversations, there's new relationships to be built, there are new policy proposals to grapple with every single year. So once you get a few years under your belt, this becomes a little more seamless and easy to digest. So let me tell you a little bit about some resources we have available to help you at each of these stages of the legislative or the advocacy cycle. So one of the most readily available and obvious tools that you and your fellow school board members will be using during the legislative session is the Washington State Legislature Online. This is just a screenshot of the homepage there. This is a state website created by the Washington State Legislature and their staff to help you navigate all things legislative. During the legislative session and actually just before it, we will do a lot of different trainings about all the different pages on here, all the different ways that you can use this resource. Some of the most common ways your fellow school directors use this is to track bills. You'll notice here something about bill information. When you click on this, it allows you to type in a bill number or look at bills that have just been filed. So you can dig into that there. You might want to know who your legislators are, or you might want to learn about a particular legislator. So the list of the legislators are all there. Of course, the ones who are listed now, some of them won't be there anymore come December. So this will be important for you to stay engaged in as those faces and names change. You can also, I'll show you another page here. You can also find your own legislators very easily. There is just a wealth of information on this website, and I would encourage you, if you want to sort of nerd out on policy stuff, just go to this website. The link is down here, and you can just start clicking around. You can't break it, I assure you. There's lots of additional training available on this website, and you can kind of get a sense for calendars, schedules, information, and some of the language that's used during a legislative session. So this is a great resource. I use it many, many times every day during the legislative process. I showed you here on the left-hand column, when you go to the homepage, it says find your district. There's also a section that you don't see over on the right-hand side of the homepage. It says find your legislators. They actually go to the same page. And you will type in, this is just an example, I typed in the administrative offices for the Camas school district here. And when I did that, I clicked on Find My District, and it actually gave a list of the state legislators representing that school district, as well as the congressional delegation, so the federal legislators representing that district. And then, although this is just a screenshot, so it's not active, when you do this online, you can actually click on these names, and it'll take you to a page with their information, which includes email address and phone number for you to contact them directly. That's really important because the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is how to connect with your legislators. One more thing before we get there, though, I'll just note when you learn, as you're learning about your legislators, which will be important for you to do because when you start building relationships, having a little bit of knowledge in your back pocket will be helpful, especially if one or more of your legislators sit on any one of these committees. There are lots and lots of committees that our legislators serve on, and many of them are outside of the K-12 space. But on the House side, we've got 4 critical committees. One is most obviously called education, then appropriation, which deals with all of the operating budget. And then there's actually a separate committee for the capital budget. So that's the committee that deals with all of the school facilities, budget items and bills. And then there's the rules committee, which is sort of like the entity that passes bills from the committees on to all of the, in this case, all of the members of the House to vote on a bill on the floor. So usually a bill impacting K-12 will start in a policy committee like education. It'll go through one of these budget or fiscal committees, has to go through rules, and then it makes it to the House in order for a full body vote. Then it goes over to the other side. Early learning in K-12 is your education committee on the Senate side. Ways and Means is the single fiscal committee that deals with both operating and capital budget together. And then they have a rules committee as well. So it's a very similar paralleled system, not exactly the same. And you'll notice the House and Senate like to do things a little bit differently, although there are tons of parallels to help you. So how to engage with your legislators. Again, you ran for office because you cared about people, and legislators are people too. So I would encourage you to approach them as you would approach anybody with whom you are trying to build a relationship. Because it's important, you'll need to seek them out. They have a lot of constituents, so you'll actually have to try to find them. And I gave you some tools on how to do that. Send them a thank you note, even if they've never met you before, and maybe you don't know what to thank them for. That's what I'm here for. Go ahead and reach out and say, hey, Marissa, what are some of the things I should be thankful about from this last legislative session? And I can help you out there. It's a great segue to say, this is who I am. Thank you so much for your investments. We'd love to have you come visit our schools and see where all those investments have gone. Another thing that you may be aware of is that a lot of our legislators are doing town halls right now. They're kind of on the tail end of those town halls. If you have an opportunity to ever go to one, it's a nice way, as a nice bridge to introduce yourself at a town hall. Sometimes those are virtual, sometimes they're in person, or sometimes they're hybrid. So if you have an opportunity to go in person, highly recommend it, because that might be your first opportunity to shake hands with a legislator and say, hi, this is who I am, and hope we can follow up with an in-person meeting sometime in the next couple months. This is optimal, right? Is that you have an opportunity to sit down across a table or on a walk with your legislators with no agenda, totally informal, and just ask them questions. Even just this last year, I met with a legislator who just was relatively green. She's only been in her seat for 2 legislative sessions now, and she's not on any of the education committees, but she's actually my legislator. And so I reached out, wanted to get to know her. We had a little small talk for the first 10 minutes or so, and she goes, so, what are we here to talk about? And I said, well, nothing specific. I just wanted to get to know you better and let you know a little bit about the work that I do representing school directors. And she goes, oh my gosh, that is such a relief. Normally people just hand me an agenda and want to talk about something concrete. It's nice to just like relax a little bit. So that was really illuminating to me that legislators sometimes just want to be treated like people too, and not always have an agenda directed them their way, especially upon your first meeting. So it makes it easier for you in terms of planning. Tips for setting up a meeting. There's really no wrong way to go about this, but there is a way that might expedite a response more quickly. If you email or call your legislator office, that information will be available on the Washington State Legislature online. Also, to reach out to their legislative assistant, who is their aide, that information will also be available on that contact information. and introduce yourself by email, say what you'd like to meet with them about. It could be just informally to get to know, and be flexible and patient in their response, especially right now, because some folks are actually taking just a little pause post-session to breathe. But I would encourage a week or two out, if you haven't heard back from them, to follow up with another email or phone call. If possible, when you actually have a meeting on the books, plan to have one other school board member join you. Remember, if you have 3, that's a formal meeting and you would need to post that. So probably optimal just to have one other school board member, and be sure to let your superintendent know that you're having that meeting, and even better yet, invite them to go along with you. Great for you to have that conversation, and probably your superintendent might already know your legislator and can bring some context to that conversation. Let the legislator and their staff know in advance who might be in attendance, especially if it's not just you, if you scheduled the meeting. And would invite you to let us know that you're meeting with that legislator. We might be able to provide you with some background information about some of the policies or budget items that that legislator has championed in the past. Could help you just have a more immediate connection with them upon your meeting. Since we've got some background information, we'd be happy to share. We'd also love to hear from you after that meeting if there were any helpful nuggets of information you learned. You might hear from them, oh, I'm really thinking about bringing forward a bill on blank next session. Would love to know that, because that can help us build our advocacy efforts in advance and be better prepared to respond. Some additional resources available to you, either during the legislative session or year round. These are all hyperlinks, so they are available to you. And again, if you have difficulty accessing this, I'm happy to provide these links to you directly via Tricia. But we actually have a standalone page on the role of a legislative representative, and a couple great videos on what a legislative representative does and why that role is important. Same is true for the student rep network. We've got a standalone page for the student rep network. Many school boards, although not required, have chosen to bring one or more student board representatives onto their board as an advisory member of the board, not a voting member, but they can help serve and support the school board's decision-making process prior to votes being taken on policies or curriculum selection. They really help to inform the student voice element of the work that you're doing. So we've got a lot of helpful tips there, including model policies and procedures from across the state, for those boards who have chosen to onboard student board reps. So you can use those as a model. We also have an Instagram page, also a Facebook page, where a lot of great information is shared, not just about advocacy, but also about relevant public education articles and activities. Would encourage you to follow us on Instagram and Facebook if you're not doing so already. And then during session, we have some tools that we refer to, it's sort of our branding, called In Session. One is called In Session. It's an action alert or an overview at the end of the week. And every Friday that will come out. You do have to subscribe to that. It's a distribution list. So at the end of the week, we send out a week in review summary, how WSSDA weighed in on bills, any bills of particular interest, and then also give you a heads up about what's coming next week in case you or your board want to weigh in. And then in addition to that, we have a Thursday, my little graphic here cut off the time, but it's Thursdays at noon every week during the legislative session. We have something called In Session Live, which is a version of our weekly updates, but it more specifically has guest speakers who might be legislators, other education stakeholders, or content area experts about policies that we're considering, who will help you to navigate what's going on during the legislative session. So would love to have you join us at noon on Thursdays during the leg session. That's another one of those situations where you can just listen in. In fact, there is no camera option for those. So it truly is just a listen and learn kind of a deal. Then we also have a tool that we use that tracks all of the education related bills as well as the calendar for any hearings that are coming up. And we post that on our website. It's linked here. It's a downloadable document that you can actually share with others. And this is one of those things we really encourage the ledge reps to download on at least a weekly basis and share out to their fellow school board members. Just as an FYI, these are the bills that are still moving, which gives you the opportunity to consider if you want to weigh in on any in particular. And then here's my email address and my phone number. Like I said earlier, I would just say I'm available to you if you have questions or concerns or thoughts or ideas. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, and we will find an opportunity to connect in a way that makes the most sense for you. And a look ahead, we're narrowing in, just got a few more slides here. So I mentioned this earlier, this is what's happening right now in the year-round advocacy cycle. School boards have the opportunity to submit position proposals that either amend, change existing positions that we already have in our platform, suggest new positions, consolidate some, like take two and make it one, or retire positions altogether. So school boards have the ability to submit board-approved proposals through the position window. I provided the link there. If your board is discussing this or is interested in discussing this, the link with timeline and forms and more guidance is provided at this link below. This is a webinar in and of itself just for this page. So this is a very high level overview of what's going on here. My guess is that a fellow school board member has a sense for this process, and my hope would be that you would reach out to them too to find out how they're planning on being engaged. And maybe you've already been part of a conversation, because in order to submit a board approved proposal, you need to have that in a public meeting and vote on it prior to the April 8th deadline for submission. And then what's great about that work is that any proposal that comes through the window will be in the General Assembly handbook for consideration by the full membership for adoption, potential adoption at General Assembly, which occurs in September. Specifically this year, September 20th and 21st. There's an in-person option for attendance in Spokane this year. Is that right? My apologies. It's not Spokane this year. It will actually be in SeaTac this year. So scratch that. So the in-person option is SeaTac this year, or any voting delegate can vote from the comforts of their own district virtually as well. The virtual option is free. There is a small registration cost to participate in person to cover the cost of the space. And then at least one of your board members can be designated to be the voting delegate. So you would vote for or against the position proposals in that General Assembly handbook. And to prepare, there is a getting ready video posted on our website. Some of the specific dates will be a little bit different because this is a getting ready from last year, but a lot of the process will be parallel. So if you're interested in learning more, I'd recommend you go to that video to learn. And then while it seems a long ways away, it's only 299 days that the next legislative session starts, which gives you a good amount of time to identify and advocate for the issues that are most important to your students, staff, and community. So again, while 299 days seems like a long time, there's a lot of time in between now and then when conversations with legislators should be happening in preparation for a long session, 105 days. What's most significant about a long session is that that's the design for the most important budget considerations and policy issues. So the odd numbered years in a long session, legislators really think of the year when they set the 2-year budget and make bigger policy changes than they might in an even numbered year. So they're getting ready for that and talking about it now. Something significant to think about for 2025, and we certainly will be talking about this more throughout the year to provide you support and guidance, is there will be a lot of new legislators in both the House and the Senate. Some of the members of the House will actually move over to the Senate as the Senate is vacating some seats. We've got a lot of retirements, which means legislators are choosing not to run again. So that has a natural and obvious opening. And then there will also be elections where the incumbent, the existing legislator, does not win their election, and there will be a new legislator in that seat in their place. So how many, we don't know yet, but it'll be significant because just the number of retirements we know are numerous. That also means there will be significant leadership and committee changes. So there's a lot for us to navigate, even those of us who are more seasoned, but it gives you a great opportunity to start fresh with new legislators and new leadership on both the House and the Senate, Republican and Democrat sides of things, because they'll be new and you're also new. Y'all won't know the difference. So get to know one another and start building that relationship early on. But it will be certainly something that even those of us who have been doing this for a while will have to navigate because there will be new faces, new relationships to build, regardless of how long we've been doing this work. So buckle up, we're getting ready for it already. And none of this work is possible or seamless without a strong legislative representative on your school board. Again, there's lots of opportunity for you to learn about that. But if you have one takeaway, I would say my hope is that your board has a legislative representative who is engaged in the year-round advocacy cycle and will help you and help to support you as you learn about this work year-round. Okay. With 10 minutes to spare, I'm going to stop talking for just a moment and let you tell me all the questions, Trisha.
I will tell you all the questions. We have a couple that I think you can get through fairly quickly, and then we have a big one for you.
Ooh,
So,
a big one. Okay.
ready?
Okay.
Okay, really good question here. Wondering about what type of data and stories are the most effective to move legislators to action? What matters more, quantity versus quality, or are those both equally important?
Oh, such a great question. I'm going to pull a phrase from our in-house counsel, Abigail Westbrook. This is something that lawyers say, but I'm also going to say it too. It depends. And the reason it depends is because just like you, legislators function differently. And we know that some legislators really love data. Some legislators really love stories. And particularly, they might want to hear a story directly from a student. So part of your work, sorry, it's not a simple answer. You really have to, you can't skip the getting to know your legislator part. That absolutely has to come first. And it might be so simple as you're getting to know them, establishing, hey, what works best for you in order to learn about what's working and what we need in our own district. Do you want data? And if so, do you want that in a spreadsheet form? Do you want it in some graphs and charts? Or do you want it in some bulleted points? And or would you prefer to hear some stories? And do you like to hear stories in a video? Do you want to save the stories for when you actually come and visit us? Do you want to hear from our students specifically? So dig into some curiosity as you're building relationships with your legislators to find out how they best receive information in terms of data and in terms of stories. I will tell you just a nugget, especially during a legislative session, the more concise you can have the information as possible, the more it will be digestible. So Excel spreadsheets are not going to be positive for your legislators. And I will tell you it's in a minority of legislators who actually have the time to nerd out on spreadsheets. So if you have the benefit of having people within your district who can help take kind of that big data and make some interesting graphics or charts or bulleted points, it'll help you and it'll probably help legislators. They can always ask for more detail if they want it. So I would say start small and then you can go big. And you've heard me talk about students a lot. My understanding from a lot of legislators is that they really want to hear stories directly from students. That's why I suggested that if you bring legislators actually to your building. Be sure that they have an opportunity to engage directly with students. We've actually heard of some school districts setting up legislator meetings with students who take them on a tour of the school, and they have an opportunity to actually talk with the students themselves. And that could be a student board rep, it could be members of your ASB, it could be members of a superintendent's advisory group. There's no right or wrong student to do that, and probably a variety of students from throughout your diverse population would be optimal, so that they're hearing different kinds of stories, not just the stories from the students who are most successful. So lots of information there. But again, it all starts with relationships. Find out what your legislators need the most, and start simple.
Great advice. Okay, we've got a couple questions here, Marissa, about the ledge rep.
Yeah.
So the first one is, in general, is the ledge rep the voting delegate at WSSDA's General Assembly, where our membership sets the priorities?
I should have gotten a law degree. It depends. If you say in general, I would say that is often a school board's default, is to have the ledge rep be the voting delegate. But there are plenty of exceptions to that rule. Sometimes the ledge rep happens to be the newest member of the board, because you got voluntold that you were going to be the ledge rep. And that means maybe you're not feeling comfortable with being the voting delegate for your board for the first year in that role. That's fine too. Anyone on the board can be a voting delegate, and that decision should be left to a vote or a decision of the board. So I would say, yeah, a lot of times that's a default. Another thing that happens is, because we have 2 days of General Assembly, a single person might not have the capacity to attend both days. And we see plenty of times where a school board has a voting delegate start on that Friday and then tag another member of the board who will then sign in to represent the board to follow up. So it could be a ledge rep and the president. It could be neither. Again, it's really a matter of comfort and what your board thinks serves them best.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll add to that too. I've often seen sometimes there will be two board members who attend, and one might be the ledge rep. And maybe if that ledge rep is brand new, they might have a more senior board member come along with them. That can sometimes be a nice way to ease people into that role when it's their first time, because General Assembly is a really big, really interesting event, and a little bit of context is always helpful. So another ledge rep question around how that ledge rep can communicate. Is it okay for the ledge rep to share information with the whole board via an email without violating OPMA, as long as they have requested that it's just informational only? Please do not respond.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And in fact, we send out information so regularly, if it's just a matter of forwarding as an FYI and a reminder, please do not respond. This is FYI only.
Perfect. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. Okay, you ready for the big question?
Oh, goodness. Okay.
How does WSSDA think this session went? They might need to ask that when you've rested a little and you're a couple more weeks out, right?
Oh, let's see. You're going to get to know my personality here a little bit. And especially because I reflect our membership, I would say that there are some wins that I am celebrating. Most significantly, that there were additional dollars allocated permanently in the prototypical funding model for materials, supplies, and operating costs. Additionally, we started the session really hopeful that the prototypical school funding model would be adjusted to increase the allocation for para educators, and that also happened. We were very hopeful that funds for capital projects, particularly around the small schools modernization, would come to fruition. That was probably our biggest win. And the policy change that occurred at the state level that is significant is that previous to this session, the state was only funding through matching SCAP dollars $1.75 per square foot, and now it's at $3.50. So that is huge. And then the funding continued for transportation and community eligibility program or school meals. Those were our members' 5 identified priorities prior to the legislative session. And I would say we either maintained or made progress in all of those areas. So in my opinion, that's something to celebrate. And also I recognize that it's not enough. So, in order for me to survive this work, and I would encourage you to take a similar approach, again, focusing on where we have won and recognizing that we're never going to get everything we ask for in the legislative session, that we focus on the progress that we've made, feel good about that, figure out how we apply that and celebrate those wins, and then turn our attention to where the gaps will continue to exist and what we need. I will also say something that we don't publish a lot of because it's really hard to celebrate things that don't happen. But there were a lot of bills this session, a lot for a short session. At one point, I was tracking 213 education related bills. That is a ton for a year when they're just supposed to be making policy tweaks. So we were a little bit nervous there at the end, or at the beginning. However, by the time the session ended, there were only about 34 policy-related bills for education that ended up passing. So a win that's hard to celebrate is a lot of bills died. And that's good, even if they were good policy ideas, because we recognize that you already have more on your plate than you're able to accomplish, with less resources required to implement those things. So we are big on pause on policy. Don't ask our schools to do more with the same resources, given that you underfunded the policies that you've already enacted. So I guess in a nutshell, I walk away from a lot of sessions saying it could have been better, it could have been worse. And so focusing on the small wins and what we do next is really the only way to survive.
Nicely done in just a couple of minutes. Well done. So that is the end of the questions. We managed to get them all in. We have a little less than a minute left. Just want to thank you all for being here today. Just a reminder, you'll find a lot of resources on our webpage. If you click on the calendar, you'll see that there are lots of opportunities for continuing education through Onboard and other events. So you can find that there. And then don't forget to join us next Tuesday. We'll be here again, same time, same place, on Tuesday, April 16th. And in case you're thinking about what those topics might look like for the next time, Marissa, if you could just advance it one more, I'll show them a couple of topics here. We're looking at things like engaging with your community, what's the value of student voice, and then also digging into some more detailed questions like how do you look at student achievement data and understanding the curriculum adoption process. If there's a topic you are dying to know about that you would like to ask us, please just email me. We have the whole year to cover these topics with you and help you get to know more about your role. So a couple of folks asked where this video is going to be available. You can go back to the New Director Network, which is under the Training and Events tab. And this webinar will be live and available, not live, recorded and available for you by Thursday. We also always upload the PowerPoint as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to email Marissa or me. And we want to thank you for coming today. Hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.